This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Purse, here with your co-host, Bill Hamill.
I'm so much more comfortable collecting real estate than I am collecting other stuff.
This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Purse, here with your co-host, Bill Hamill. This morning, we interviewed Julia Barbaro. Bill, what'd you think?
Julia's a great guest. I love Julia. We've known each other for a little over a year, and we have a bit in common. We both had no interest in doing things like podcasts or public speaking, but she's an amazing podcast guest, an amazing life coach. I appreciate everything Julia has to offer.
Almost every episode comes back to mentality and relationships because those things that are outside of real estate investing end up being the foundation of your real estate investing.
It's all about the growth mindset.
This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. Julia Barbaro, thank you so much for being here this morning. Can you tell us more about yourself?
Hi, Stephen. Thank you. And thank you, Bill. My name is Julia Barbaro. Some of you know my husband, Gino, who is a Jake and Gino Community owner. He's been in real estate for many years. I'm sure a lot of you know his background, but my background is a little different, I would say. We've been married for about 24 years. We have 6 children together. I do homeschool. I spent most of my early marriage, I guess even probably up to about 3 years ago, just being home, watching the kids, taking care of the home, taking care of, in a sense, my husband and the behind the scenes. And it got to a point where about, like I said, about 3-4 years ago, where our youngest, who is right now 7, just didn't need me as much. I know everyone out there, at one point their kids are, they're on their own in a sense. They're going to grandma's for a sleepover. And I thought, there's got to be something else. There's got to be something that I could be doing. And through watching my husband touch so many people's lives through his life coaching, I thought, I wonder if there's something out there for me to do something like that. I don't have experience as far as in psychology. I didn't really have a degree. So I thought, well, what could that be? What could that look like for me? And I did look into marriage coaching and life coaching because I have this passion for marriage. I feel like the world is suffering because marriage is suffering. I know that's a big statement, but if we could fix the family, there's so much more we could do in this world. And so that was my passion. So I looked into it and I found something. And through home, I did it all via Zoom, via phone calls. I did get my life coaching certificate, and it's been an unbelievable journey since then. It feels like the next part of my life. I spent a lot of time at home before that, and now I can reach out to people through my experiences instead of my education. Does that make sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense, and we're really excited about you being here today. We're going to get a different perspective. I know Gino so well, and I know you very, very well also.
Yes.
And I listened to your podcast, which has been very valuable to me. You get that different family aspect and also a little bit of real estate, because when Gino tries to bring up real estate on your show, he gets the nudge. And we bring it back to, what the focus is that particular day. So you like to specialize on the marriage side. What type, or do you do group marriage coaching? Do you do individual? What does that look like right now?
Yeah, that's great, Bill. One of the things you mentioned is our podcast. We do have a podcast. It's called MultiFamily Zone. We're going to be rebranding it as the Julia and Gino Show, just to make it more simple for people to find. The beauty of that is we're all looking to be successful. And I know a lot of people out there are doing real estate and they want to be successful, but then they go home. And if they're not satisfied and they're not in a good place at home, then what's the point, in a sense, right? Because you're making the money, you're doing all this, and you're not fulfilled at home. And so we try to bring that in to the multifamily zone, is to bring in how to be a better parent, how to be a better spouse. And we have some really amazing guests. We even had Dr. Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages. We had him on. He actually came on our show. He's this huge author. I was so humbled that he was talking with my husband and myself. And so we tried to, in that podcast, try to reach out to everyone listening, just being there for each other, how to learn how to communicate with your spouse, even with your children. So that's been a huge aspect in our life coaching, my husband and I. But we also have, through the Jake and Gino community, a life, it's a couples coaching. We meet once a month, and we have probably a dozen couples on, sometimes 24 couples on. And our goal is this. We don't have the perfect marriage. We don't have the perfect family. And it's important that other families, other couples know that we all struggle with the same issues. I found that every time I was coaching another couple, we ran into the same issues. We ran into, my husband doesn't know how to communicate. He doesn't know how to listen. I overreact every time I tell a story, and I accuse him of things that actually aren't true. And all of these are just over and over again the same situation. And so I thought, well, let's just have a group couples coaching, because we all deal with the same issues, and why not talk about them and let other people know that we're in the same boat. We're all together. We're dealing with the same issues. And yes, you can change if you so choose to. And a lot of times too, this is something important, is maybe the husband wants to change, but the wife isn't interested. And we talk about this sometimes in Toastmasters, Bill, is that if you change, if you start working on yourself and learn to be a better listener, learn to be a better speaker, practice that patience, it does, your spouse does notice it, and eventually they want that. And so they'll,
Absolutely. I get a lot of value out of your MultiFamily Zone podcast. I'm a single 25-year-old, but that message
awesome.
of going home and being fulfilled there is still true, no matter what stage of life you're in. And on the surface, being a podcast host, being a homeschool teacher, being a life coach might seem very different, but you're a very good presenter, very good speaker. And I'm wondering if you see that correlation from all those years of teaching pay off and have that be similar to what you're doing today.
That's a great question, Stephen. I just want to thank you for listening to our show, because you just made a really good point. You don't have to be married, because relationship is not just about spousal. It is about how you interact with your mother, your father, your siblings. As an adult, it's almost like we have to relearn how to communicate with each other. We go from a child in a home into an adult, and we have to say, okay, well, now my sister is no longer my annoying little sister that I lived with. Now she's an adult. Now how do I communicate with her? Same with the parents. How do we communicate with our parents? It's different when we're an adult. And I think that's something that we have to remember. We have to reanalyze how we are as people in the world. But getting back to your question, the funny thing is, one of my biggest fears in life was speaking in front of people, and not just a crowd of people. I'm talking like I would never be on this podcast. Bill, because I was on Toastmasters for so long, speaking to other people was absolutely terrifying. Like I couldn't even see, if I had a paper in front of me to read, I couldn't even see it. I was so nervous. I would never have done it before. And so even as a homeschool teacher, I avoided mothers groups. I avoided all those little things where you had to sit in a circle and tell people your name and your kids. I avoided them, and I missed out on so many relationships over the past 20 years of having children, because that was my fear. And at one point when my husband said, let's do a podcast, I'm like, no way, no way. And he's like, Julia, come on, we have so much to offer. We could change somebody's life. I thought, man, that's annoying. Why did you have to say that? Because, at one point in life, it's like, why wouldn't we do that? Why would we hold ourselves back because of a fear that we have? And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. And it took everything in me to walk into my husband's office, to put the headphones on and to start talking. It was my biggest fear in life. And I know a lot of you can relate, because I discovered that that's pretty much the biggest fear that we all have, is to talk in front of people. But if it's going to change someone's life, wouldn't you do it? Why would you let that person miss out on your story? And that's how I did it. So it wasn't about, I learned something from raising the children. It was, I had to step out of and actually give back to people. And I'm so thankful, because look what I would have missed out on.
Geez, the scary part is I can relate with so much of that. And as you were just talking, I had 10 different responses, and that's a scary thing because, if a year ago, if I jumped on stage, I had a lot to say, and then you get on stage and it's like, okay, now I'm in trouble. What am I going to do? The one thing that I did hear you say, it was in the middle of that, is the relationships. And a couple years ago, and I've had a lot of, I've been in the same area for 50 years. And I've had a lot of friends from elementary school, junior high, high school. So I felt like I always had this inner circle and relationships are fine, but never stretching out and building more relationships. And I realized how I neglected that and what a problem that was. And a lot of that is fear. It's going to different events. It's speaking in front of people that you haven't known for 20 years. And it's getting outside of that comfort zone. But if you're looking to create bigger relationships, affect people's lives positively, you have no choice but to, okay, it's uncomfortable. So what do we know now? Lean into it. Lean into it, and it's going to be bright on the other side once you get past that area. So, I can't stress that enough. I think both of us have gone through that. Getting back to, when Gino comes home from work and you've just homeschooled all day and did what you did or do what you do, that personal development is the one thing that brings me to this next thought. Gino comes home in a great mood. Okay, that sets the tone. Gino comes home in a bad mood. That sets the tone for the entire family. Tell us a little bit about that, whether it be how someone brings their presence into the picture and the language, whether it be emotions or just being aware, the meaning of things and how that affects everything that we do.
Bill, that's a great question. And as you're talking about that, I have this picture in my head that you would appreciate. And this was back years ago when he still worked at the restaurant. He owned a restaurant for about 25 years up in New York before we left and moved down to Florida. And then he pursued real estate. I would see him. And yes, it's interesting because there were long winters in New York, really long winters. We stayed home a lot with the kids I stayed home a lot because it was just difficult to bring them all out. I remember particularly this one night when he came home, and it was about 11 o'clock, and it was winter, and it was freezing cold outside. And he used to wear the long johns underneath his chef outfit because it was so cold. He'd be in the walk-in freezer all day. It was just horrible for him. He came home, and I've never seen such sadness from a person, and I could see just the disappointment, all of those emotions just right on his face. I had put the kids to sleep. I finally got the house straightened up, and I was just ready to just call it for a night and go to sleep, really, because I was just wiped out. I saw him come home, and I was a little irritated because it was just a rough day, when we have those days. So here we are both in a really bad place. And I saw him come in. He took his chef coat off. He put it in the laundry basket, and he just stood there in the kitchen. And I was about to say, why are you looking like that? I had such a hard day, telling him about my day. And I said, oh my gosh, he looks like he's about to break. And I took all my issues and I thought, you know what? They really weren't that bad. I got to stay home with my kids all day. Yes, it was difficult, but I could see something in him that he needed support. And I walked up to him. I'm like, come on, let's go make some tea. And I sat on the couch with him, and I'm like, what's going on? And that was the night he said, listen, he's like, what if we sold the restaurant, sold the house, and moved to Florida? And I was like, holy smokes. Like, in my head, I'm like, wait, hold on a second. Everyone and everything we know is here. I don't know anyone, but I saw something in him, there's a lot that led up to this. It wasn't just one night, but it was month after month that I saw this. And I said, sure, okay. And he's like, really? And I said, let's do it. And it was one of those moments when I realized that we're in this together as a couple. We're a team. If my husband needs something so ridiculous like moving away, would do it with him because I saw he needed that. I saw he needed to get away, and it was just a really bad place he was in. And it turned out to be the best thing we ever did because there was something there that I have to tell you is that there was trust. We forget that we have to trust each other as a couple. I know my husband's not going to do something ridiculous and just let's move to the beach and who knows how we'll make money. You know what I mean? He was preparing. He was preparing as he had a full-time job at the restaurant. He was also preparing for real estate at the same time. And I saw that in him. And a lot of times as couples, we don't notice the work the person's putting into it because we're just busy with our own life. And that's where the awareness comes in. The awareness of notice your husband, notice your spouse, or even if it's you're living at home, you're not married yet, notice your parents struggle and ask them, what's going on? I'm here. Because we forget that we could ask the person. We think we know everything. We think we know the emotions going behind and their thoughts in their head, but we really don't. But we can ask.
It takes a lot of empathy and, like you said, awareness and perspective to ask that question. It's a lot harder to do it in the moment than to talk about it. And you don't have to tell us about the New York winters because we're still stuck up here. We're in the middle of one. So this is the Collecting Real Estate show. At that point, it sounded like Gino had mentally made the decision that he wanted to be a real estate investor. He had this story or vision in his head of where he wanted himself, you, and the entire family to be in sunny Florida, investing in real estate. He could see it. He wanted to share that vision with you. I think there's a lot of people out there who are in a similar spot where they see themselves in a different state, maybe on a more entrepreneurial path, but they're not sure how to make that leap. Being the spouse, what was it like going through that process as he was making that decision and making that large leap in his journey?
Sure. That's a really great question. And I do get that a lot, Stephen. I get that a lot from husbands trying to talk their wives into letting me do real estate. That's usually how it comes out. Those are not my words. And it's a good question because a lot of times, and it's just the reality. Usually men are in real estate and their wives are not, which has been changing in the Jake and Gino community, which I'm noticing. But at the same time, I watched my husband research. I watched him come home from the restaurant, full-time restaurant, go into his office and start working with Jake, trying to find deals, educating himself. He did not come home and watch TV. He did not come home and play any kind of video game. He did not come home and then go out with the guys drinking at the bars. He literally came home from work, went into his office and started researching real estate. And I think that's really important is that are you, and these are all the people out there trying to convince or even just explain to their spouses what they're trying to do, are you showing them that you're putting in the effort? Because that's a huge thing. If I didn't see that, I wouldn't have been like, yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll go to Florida. I saw what he was doing. The other thing that I think is important is Gino said something to me that was pretty impressive at the time. Looking back, he said, would you be willing? He used those words, would you be willing to give me a chance? And I think that's exciting because he's not saying, this is what I'm doing. You're going to have to be on board. We're both on board together. As a couple, we're a team. We have the same goal. And I think that's important for everyone to know is that we're not doing this. He's not working over here. I'm working over here. And we have two different goals. We have the same goal. And if I'm a team member, obviously I have to be on board with what he's doing. But I have to see that he's putting in that work. He's putting in the effort because that's important, isn't it?
Absolutely. Looking outside in, and I just have to point out, I feel like I know two different chapters of the Barbaro family life. It is Gino's Trattoria, building a real estate business and an education platform between, say, 2011 up till 2016. And then you have 2016 till now. So I'm equating that to or relating that to what we were just talking about is getting outside of our comfort zone, dealing with a lot of challenges, trials, tribulations in one part of our life, and then it opens that door to something greater. Is there any relation with that? Tell us about those trials and tribulations and the sacrifices those first 5 or 6 years, and then where you've been since 2017.
Sure. The sacrifice that I made was to be home. I've actually sacrificed the whole career from the beginning because I knew that I wanted to stay home with my children and raise them. And it's funny because that was one of the first conversations my husband and I had before we even started dating. And he thought, wait, what? You want to stay home and raise a family? I said, yes. He's like, I don't really hear that much anymore. And I just had this desire to do that. That was the biggest sacrifice that I had made in my life. And I'm so thankful that I did it because I see the fruit from it. And we don't see it at first. We see it many, many, many years later as our children grow up and become adults in the world. And one of the other sacrifices that I think my husband, well, both of us, but I can just talk about myself, is that he worked long hours at the restaurant. It wasn't just a 9 to 5 job. And so him working constantly at the restaurant meant that I was home constantly with children. And a lot of us know that it's mentally exhausting to be home with kids all day long and to be around them all day long. And again, sacrifice. And I think that's when we talk about love, a lot of us use the word love so freely these days, but a love in a family, a love in a marriage and as a mother is sacrificial love. It's not just like, I love chocolate. Yes, I love you. I'll do anything for you. And I think that's something that we forget is that there's more to it than just trying to get through the day with the kids. It's like full on sacrifice. And it's such a good word. But going from the restaurant, then that trust, that I had for my husband, it's such a big deal that I can't even emphasize it enough, that we need to trust each other. Otherwise, we're not going to be making those crazy steps. We're not going to be leaving our job and going in full-time real estate. We need to trust each other. We need to trust ourselves. And that's huge. A lot of times it's like, okay, yes, yes, I trust you, but do you trust yourself? Because if you don't trust yourself, you're not going to succeed. And in order to trust yourself, you have to put in the education. You have to put yourself out there and talk to brokers. You have to go out, because a lot of people that I coach with the Jake and Gino community, they're afraid to call brokers because they don't want to sound bad. They don't know, well, what if they ask me a question? I don't know the answer. And this is a big deal. So we don't trust ourselves. And so if we have those questions, well, what if they ask a question and we don't know the answer? We could say, hey, that's a great question. I'm going to get back to you on that. Thanks for asking that. It's simple, but we have to think it through. We have to come up with a plan and think it through. And then the sacrifice of leaving New York, leaving everyone we knew because my husband needed a change. Again, it's yes, let's do it. We're doing it together. I'm not, and here's the thing. When we sacrifice ourselves for someone else like this, we have to do it willingly. We have to do it with our free will and say, you know what? Yes, I'm going to do this. And no, I'm not going to hold this against you. Because a lot of times we'll say yes to people and then be bitter and then be angry. I can't believe I can't believe you left the restaurant and took on real estate. Now I'm not happy. It's your fault. We have to be willing to say yes and actually go all out and do it. And if we're not happy, we have to change that.
What I hear is you and Gino have either visions or ideas in your head, and then you execute them. Whether it's you knowing you wanted to raise a family. I'm sure at one point Gino had the vision of the restaurant, and then that turns into the real estate. And I think that execution comes down to those words that you mentioned, the trust and the love, and you as a team executing that together. You mentioned coaching people through the Jake and Gino community and people having mental barriers to do things like hop on a phone and cold call a broker because it's not easy. No one wakes up and says, I want to cold call people today. It's not fun.
Sure.
But once you get over that mental barrier, you realize that you can do it, and that opens up possibilities to do other things in the future. Are there other things like the cold calls that you see regularly with these investors or any individuals that you're coaching that are just mental roadblocks or things that they need to get over in one way or another?
Sure. What we were talking about, the cold calling, is one of the biggest questions I actually get, which is so interesting. And I'm sure everyone listening can relate at some point, but we could put that toward anything. we're afraid to do anything, and we kind of shut down and we're like, I don't want to know how to do it. I can't do it. I'm going to put it on someone else. And anytime we get to that point where we try to avoid, it's voluntary distractions. We find something else to do. If we're going to be calling someone a broker or whatever, and I'm finding something else to do over here, it was like, let me just go and do this over here because this is important. We're avoiding it purposely. And we've all done it. I've been there. Like, we're getting back to that. When I did that first podcast with Gino, I was terrified because everything, and I'm not good enough. I'm not educated enough. I'm not smart enough. What if Gino says something, I don't have a response? What if someone out there is listening and I say the wrong thing and they're like, that's so ridiculous. I can't believe she just said that. And if everything goes through your head. And the way I get through stuff like that, even the advice that I give people is just do it anyway. Even if you look bad the first time, even if you don't say the right thing, you stumble your words, you mess up. So what? So what? And we try to be this perfect person and always sound incredible and always look great. And it's just not reality. And nobody wants that, because we don't want a perfect person in front of us. We want to see your faults. We want to see your struggles and how you overcame so many things. I'm not a professional anything. I failed so much. That's why I'm a pretty good mom, I guess, but I've made so many mistakes along the way. I have a 7-year-old and a 22-year-old. And it's interesting to talk to the older kids and ask them, tell me how I messed up. I want to know. And they'll talk about it. They're like, no, Mom, you did everything right. And I'm like, no, seriously. Like, I want to have this conversation because I want to be a better mother for the younger kids. And so we could go down that road. But it's so important that if we want to succeed in something, we have a plan for it. We have a plan and we actually execute. We have to come up with a step-by-step. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's how I'm going to do it. If I fail at this part, I'll try it this way instead next time. Because if we don't have a plan, then it's just a thought in our head and we won't do it.
That's it. It's that plan. So this time of year, me and Stephen had been focusing on the first part of January is, all right, what are our goals this year? What do we have to do to get to those goals? And what is that fuel, that why, that's going to get us there? So I did a presentation on this where if it was easy, we'd all be operating at a super high level. So I don't want to minimize how hard it is to reach your goals. So we have a lot of very important action items that we have to do to get to that goal. But if our why isn't strong enough, we're going to procrastinate some of those action items. Some of those action items are going to be outside of our comfort zone. And if we're not going to do those items, guess what? You're not reaching your goal. Tell us a little bit the importance, in your perspective, the importance of that why.
Sure. The why is super important. My husband talks about it. Gino talks about that quite often. Because if we don't have a reason for something, why bother? What's the point? And it's just the reality. I'm very Christian. I know a lot of people out there are as well. My goal in life is to get to heaven, which is a big deal. I want to be a good person. Integrity is one of my biggest values. I want to be a good person as far as, even if no one's watching, I want to do the right thing. And I desire that. I desire to do the right thing. And so even when we look to get a partner, whether it's a marriage partner or a business partner, what are the values that they have? Because they should kind of align. Wouldn't you agree? Shouldn't they align with what your values are as far as what kind of business you have, about what kind of marriage you have? And so getting back to the why, the reason, we make these goals. January 1st, everyone makes these health decisions. They're going to exercise every day. They're going to eat healthy. And a couple of days later, they're finding that they're going out drinking, they're going out eating dessert. And why? Because we don't have an actual, here's why I want to get healthy. Here's the reasons behind it. Is it because I don't want to feel bad anymore? Because I want to live longer? I have children. You have to have an actual reason behind something in order to make a decision and actually stick with it. And that's important. If we don't have a reason, then you're going to, 3 days later, you're like, I'll just cheat today. No big deal. because there's no reason. We have to have something. My children are there watching me. And one of the most painful things is one of my daughters, Veronica, she's terrified of public speaking as well. And I kind of joke with her. I'm like, oh, Veronica, I was definitely worse than you when I was your age. But sometimes when she's in the room and I have to give a talk at one of the Jake and Gino, the events, like I am dying inside, terrified. And the girls are like, Mom, how you doing? I'm like, great. I'm doing great. And one time I come up to her, I'm like, Veronica, I'm terrified. I'm so scared. This is she's 13 years old. And she's, Mom, you're going to do great. And so sometimes you have to bring yourself down a little bit and say, you know what, I am scared. And have a 13-year-old tell you you're going to do a great job. And that's my why, because not that I want to show her that I could do it, but I want to show her that it's hard. I want to show her that, yes, life is hard and we're going to face these horrible fears of public speaking or whatever it is. But it's important for me to let her know that, and so that she could be like, wow, my mom's scared. All right. And she's doing it, so I could do it. We need to show people that we're afraid sometimes. We need to show people that it's difficult and that we fail and we fall. But the greatest part is that we can get up. We can get up, shake the dust off, and keep moving because we have our reason. We have our why. And she knows why I'm up there because I tell her, I'm like, listen, it's a good idea if I talk, because then maybe a marriage will be helped. And she's like, yeah, Mom, that's great. Let's go. And that's the reason. You have to have a reason in order to actually put in the effort, be terrified, but do it anyway.
So tell us about knowing that your entire family goes to the Jake and Gino events. And I saw some stuff on social media. You and Gino were on stage. So, you're in front of 100, 150 people at this point, and you still have a little bit of the butterflies. I think that's always going to be there. Gino probably still gets them to a certain degree. And that's part of, the game. That's part of performing and doing well. If you don't have the butterflies, then there's probably something wrong. Tell us more about, because your kids are at these events. I know they're selling swag. And then they're also, Veronica's encouraging you that you're going to do fine. Do you feel like they're soaking all of this in to where they have a desire, or some of them have a desire to where someday they're going to be on stage at a Jake and Gino event?
That's a great question. It's one of the things that I loved about the restaurant was it was a family affair. We would all be there. We would all, I'd bring the kids in. We would eat with my husband, and all the customers knew us. And I loved that family feeling where my husband was there working, but we were also there. Sometimes my kids would walk in and they would also work with their grandma, who, Gino's brother also worked there. And I loved the family aspect of the company, the restaurant. And when he did real estate, I have to tell you that I was a little down. I thought, well, that's great, but we're losing that family business, that family where the kids can go into work with you. And, he was home, but still it wasn't the same. And what had come out of his real estate adventure is this Jake and Gino Community, where I still think about it sometimes. I cannot believe what it became. It became a whole family company again, which it just happens. And I can't believe it, but I'm so, so thankful. And yes, my kids come to the events. They do sell stuff. And just having them there, you see little sparks in their eyes. My son put money into a couple of the deals. He didn't know anything about it or how to do it. This is a couple of years ago. And all of a sudden he's getting a little money back every month. It's like, oh my gosh. So the other girls see that, well, why can't I put money into a deal? So, there's like a conversation going on about now how to invest. And the kids are young. Veronica's young. Sophia is 16 years old. And she's like, well, maybe this year I could put money into a deal as well. And so it opens their eyes to all these different aspects in life. And, they're exposed to the sales team, which is incredible. They have Josh and Dylan and Scott. They're selling the education. And my kids will be in the office hearing them sell education. Our little one, Laura, she's 7. She's the best salesperson I know. She can get anything she wants from anyone. It's very impressive. but you could see their desires coming out, being exposed to just something that they never expected, which is real estate. But there's so much more to it. Like I said, there's the podcast, there's the editing, we're starting to, video everyone, and there's so many parts of the company. And I think to everyone out there who has children, include your children in on whatever you're doing, because there's other parts to it. Then it's not just real estate. There's a whole family affair going on. Like I said, there's editing, there's video, there's lighting, there's the mic checks. I mean, there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes. There's selling the swag, there's talking to people, there's investing. There's so many things that the kids can be interested in. And I think that's something important as a parent, is that you bring them in and expose them to as much as you can.
No, that's beautiful. So you guys, just this business and the education platform and the events, there are so many areas that they can get involved in. It doesn't have to be investing. It could be, on the sales end, selling anything. It could be on the production end,
Sure.
because of everything that you're doing. So no, that's great for them to see. I think that there's huge value in that. This is the Collecting Real Estate show. So they say you have to have 3 of something to make a collection. We have 3 questions to finish up this great episode. Number 1, what is your 1-year business goal?
That's a great question, Bill. A little something about myself is I know nothing about real estate. Isn't that fascinating? But somehow I am so part of the Jake and Gino community and part of Gino's company. And that's my point, is that your spouse out there, if you want her part of your company, ask her, would you be willing to be part of me? I want you to be part of what we're doing, because it's so important. And there are not just real estate. Like I said, there's other things that the wife can do. Some husbands as well. Some wives are in it and the husbands are not. And sometimes all it is support, because I can't emphasize how important support is to someone in your life, in your family that's trying to succeed. And if they don't have your support, they're not going to succeed. They might succeed, but not nearly as much as if they have your full on support. And so I think that's what it is to give my husband more support. And I know that sounds little, but it's not. I can't stress how much it is, how important it is. When I say support, Gino, how can I help you? What do you need done? You look stressed. It's the awareness of each other in that moment. Remember, I talked to you earlier about when my husband came home from the restaurant and he just looked broken. If we're aware of each other, we can help each other more than you can ever imagine, because now I could say, okay, Gino's not doing good. Let me jump in and give him a hand. And so I think seriously, supporting is my, I don't know, my goal. What do you think?
That's huge. That's
not an answer you expected.
No, and that's fine. That's powerful. That's powerful. You two have created, something fantastic. So it's working very, very well. Number 2, your 1-year personal goal.
That's a great one. That's a harder one, isn't it? It's harder to have a personal development because you have to stop figuring out everyone else and now focus on yourself. And I think that's a great question, because a lot of times we do forget about ourselves because we're so focused on the other person. I'm going to say I'm going to do more life coaching. I think I want to take another course in that, but mostly about just personal life coaching. Why maybe do more speaking, maybe getting out of that comfort, because I need my husband on stage with me. I need I need him.
No, you don't.
For my backup.
No, you don't.
You know what I mean?
You're good.
I've never, this is new to me, to be the only person interviewed, because it's one of those things where I'm like, if he's there and I struggle, then he could take over. So I think that's what I'm going to work on, is being comfortable by myself. And I don't mean that in a, I don't need my husband, but just getting out of that comfort zone of not being able to handle that conversation, that talk on my own.
Love that. How can Steve and I or the listeners assist you, and how do we contact you?
Oh, well, you could definitely email me. It's juliabarbaro@gmail.com. You can also go on the Jake and Gino site and check out the MultiFamily Zone podcasts. There's areas there where you could comment on any show. I do love to hear, and I have to make this clear. When people email me about their story, I absolutely love it. I really do. I appreciate everyone that emails me and just gives me their story, their struggles, their difficulties, but their wins. I really appreciate them, and I do want to hear from you.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about. It makes us feel great. If we're able to make someone else feel good, it makes us feel good. It's what comes around goes around. Thank you very much for being on the show. I had a lot of fun with this. Thanks again, and enjoy your day.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Julia.